The night everything fell apart, started with a stranger sliding an envelope across my table. No warning. No explanation. Just a quiet whisper. "Ma'am, don't open that here." Then she walked out like she'd never been there at all. And that was the moment my peaceful little life in Georgia stopped being peaceful. My name is Loretta Jackson. 72 years old. Born and raised in rural Georgia, right outside a small town most folks drive through without even slowing down. I've been living on the same piece of land for 45 years. Red clay soil, pecan trees out back, a white farmhouse that's been patched up so many times it's practically held together by stubbornness. My husband Calvin and I bought it when we were young and broke. Back then the house had no porch, the roof leaked when it rained, and the well pump coughed like an old smoker. But we built that place into a home. Calvin passed last year. Heart attack, they said. Life got quieter after that. Too quiet sometimes. That's why every Friday afternoon I drive into town and sit at Miss Ruby's cafe. Same booth. Same sweet tea. Same slice of peach cobbler if Ruby hasn't sold out yet. Nobody bothers you there. But that afternoon my son Derek and his wife Monica had joined me. Derek sat across from me wearing one of those tight business shirts he likes so much now that he works in real estate. Monica had her phone out, tapping and scrolling like the whole world lived inside that screen. The spoon in her glass kept hitting the side. Clink. 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 Finally she sighed. "Loretta, we need to talk." Anytime somebody starts a sentence like that, you already know you're not gonna like what comes next. Derek leaned forward. "Mom, that property out there is a lot for one person." "Here we go." "You're getting older," Monica added gently, though the words didn't feel gentle. "There are retirement communities near Savannah. Beautiful ones. Security, neighbors, medical staff." I took a slow sip of my tea. "I'm doing just fine." Derek rubbed his forehead. "It's not about that. It's about practicality. Taxes on that land are climbing every year. Maintenance, repairs, what if something happens out there?" "What kind of something?" I asked. He hesitated just a little too long. "You know, accidents." That word sat on the table like a bad smell. Before I could answer, Derek's phone rang. He stepped outside with Monica to take the call. That's when the stranger appeared. She slid into the booth across from me so quietly I nearly dropped my fork. Maybe mid-50s. Dark coat. Hair pulled back tight. But her eyes. Lord have mercy. They were locked on me like she'd been searching for me all day. "Loretta Jackson," she said. Not a question. "Yes?" I said carefully. She pulled a thin brown envelope from her coat and set it on the table. Her hand shook just a little. "You're going to need this tonight." My stomach twisted. "For what?" Her voice dropped low. "Whatever you do, don't open it here." I blinked. "Ma'am, I don't even know who you..." But she was already gone. Just stood up and walked out the cafe door like smoke in the wind. I looked around. Nobody seemed to notice. Derek and Monica came back inside seconds later. "Everything okay?" Derek asked. I slipped the envelope into my purse before he could see it. "Yeah," I said. But my hands had started trembling. The drive home felt longer than usual. My farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by tall pecan trees and quiet woods. Derek dropped me off and headed back to town without even stepping inside. That was unusual. When his truck disappeared down the road, the silence settled over the land like a heavy blanket. Something about the place felt different. Like eyes were on me. Inside the kitchen I set the envelope on the table. I didn't open it right away. Instead I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat there staring at it while the sun disappeared behind the trees. Night came slow. Crickets started singing outside. Finally I sighed and tore the flap open. Inside were only two things. A small brass key. And a folded strip of notebook paper. The message was written in neat, careful handwriting. 11:32 p.m. Answer the phone. Don't trust Derek. My breath caught in my throat. Because right at that exact moment, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. And when I answered, the voice on the other end said something that made my blood run cold. Loretta, baby, it's Calvin. My husband. The man they buried last year. Because if Calvin was really dead, then who was calling Loretta from the darkness? And why did he warn her that her own son wanted the land, no matter what it cost? For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The phone trembled in my hand as that voice came through the speaker again. Loretta, baby, it's Calvin. Now listen. When you've been married to someone for 47 years, you know their voice the way you know your own heartbeat. Every laugh. Every sigh. Every little pause between words. And that voice? That was my husband. But Calvin Jackson had been dead for a year. Buried out behind the church under a stone marker that still didn't look real to me. So the only thing my brain could say was, no. My voice came out dry and shaky. This ain't funny. Whoever this is, you better stop playing. There was silence on the other end. Then a slow breath. The kind Calvin used to take when he was about to tell me something serious. Loretta, listen to me real careful. We don't have much time. My knees almost gave out. I pulled a chair back and sat down hard at the kitchen table. You're not Calvin, I whispered. I wish I could explain everything, the voice said. But if I stay on this line too long, they'll trace it. Trace it? My chest tightened. What are you talking about? The voice dropped even lower. Don't trust Derek. Those 4 words hit harder than a punch. I felt my stomach knot up. That's my son you're talking about, I snapped. Another pause. Then Calvin's voice, soft but firm. I know it is. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the silence. Tick. 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 You remember that land behind the north woods? He asked. My eyes slowly drifted toward the dark window over the sink. Course I remember it. That land ain't just land, Loretta. I swallowed. What does that even mean? More breathing. Then the words that made my heart slam against my ribs. The reason Derek wants you to sell ain't about money. A cold chill crawled up my spine. Then what's it about? The line crackled for a moment like wind blowing through static. Then Calvin said something that made my hands start shaking again. It's about what's under it. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Like the walls were leaning in. Under it? I said slowly. Yes. What's under it? There was a long pause. Long enough for fear to start growing in my chest like weeds. Finally the voice came back. Proof. My mouth went dry. Proof of what? The answer came out almost like a whisper. Proof that I didn't die by accident. The air left my lungs. What? They forced my truck off the road, Calvin said. I tried to stop them. My hand flew to my mouth. No, they said the brakes failed. They lied. The words landed heavy in the room. I could hear something in the background of the call now. Like a car door slamming somewhere. Calvin's voice got urgent. You have to listen to me now. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. That key in the envelope? Yes. It opens the old tool shed behind the barn. I blinked. That thing's been locked for years. Inside you'll find a trapdoor under the workbench. The blood drained from my face. A trapdoor? Yes. Calvin, what are you talking about? But before he could answer, the line exploded with static. Loretta, he said quickly, voice fading. They're already watching the house. My chest tightened. What? You need to get what I left down there before Derek does. The call started breaking apart. Calvin, wait. His final words barely came through. The truth is buried under your land, and your own family will do anything to keep it that way. Then the line went dead. Just like that. Silence filled the kitchen. The phone screen went black. No number. No call log. Nothing. Like the call had never happened. I sat there frozen, staring at the brass key in my hand. My husband's voice echoed in my mind. Don't trust Derek. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. Because if Calvin was telling the truth, then the man I raised, the little boy who used to chase fireflies in that same backyard, might be the very person trying to take everything from me. And worse than that, he might be the reason my husband was dead. But the thing that scared me most wasn't the call. It was what happened the next morning. Because just after sunrise, Derek pulled into my driveway. And this time, he didn't come alone. Because when Loretta opens the front door the next morning, her son won't just be asking about the land. He'll be asking about the envelope he was never supposed to know existed. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. Not one. Every little sound outside the house had me jumping. The wind moving through the pecan trees. The creak of the porch boards. Even the refrigerator humming felt too loud. I sat at the kitchen table the whole night with that brass key in my hand, staring at the back window that looked out toward the barn. Toward the old tool shed Calvin had mentioned. A trapdoor. Lord help me. I had lived on that property for 45 years and never once heard about a trapdoor. By the time the sky started turning gray with morning light, my nerves were stretched tighter than a guitar string. That's when I heard tires on gravel. My head snapped toward the window. A black SUV rolled slowly up my driveway. Not Derek's truck. Something newer. Something expensive. The driver's door opened. And out stepped Derek. He looked tired. Real tired. Like he hadn't slept either. But when the passenger door opened, my stomach dropped. 2 men stepped out behind him. Big men. Suits. The kind of guys who don't look like they're visiting for coffee. I stood up slowly from the table. Lord, what now? I muttered under my breath. A few seconds later Derek knocked on the door. 3 sharp taps. Just like someone who already expected to come inside. I opened it halfway. What's all this about? Derek forced a smile. Morning, Mom. My eyes slid past him toward the man behind him. And who are they? Business associates, he said quickly. Business associates. That was a fancy way of saying trouble. One of the men gave me a tight little nod like he was sizing up a piece of property. Didn't like that one bit. Derek stepped forward like he planned to walk right in. I kept the door where it was. You mind explaining why you're bringing strangers to my house this early? His smile thinned. We need to talk. About? The land. Of course. It always came back to that. I leaned against the doorframe. Thought we already talked about that yesterday. Mom, listen, Derek said, dropping the fake smile. We're running out of time. Now that was interesting. Running out of time for what? He hesitated. Just for a second. But that was long enough for my heart to start thumping. Then he said something that made the air leave my lungs. Did someone visit you at Ruby's Cafe yesterday? My grip on the door tightened. I kept my face calm though. What are you talking about? His eyes sharpened. Mom, don't play games with me. Behind him one of the men shifted his weight like he was getting impatient. Derek lowered his voice. A woman sat with you yesterday. My pulse started pounding. How would you know that? He didn't answer. Instead he asked another question. Did she give you something? Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I shrugged casually. Plenty of folks hand me church flyers and coupons. You gonna be more specific? His jaw clenched. Then he said the one thing that made my stomach twist. An envelope. The kitchen suddenly felt colder. Calvin's voice echoed in my head again. They're already watching the house. I crossed my arms. You drove all the way out here with hired muscle to ask about junk mail? Derek's patience cracked. Mom. The two men behind him stepped forward slightly. Not threatening exactly. But close enough. Derek leaned in. Look, if somebody gave you something yesterday, you need to hand it over. Why? His answer came fast. Because it doesn't belong to you. Now that made me laugh. A slow, tired laugh. Boy, this land, this house, every rusty nail in that barn belongs to me. His eyes flicked past my shoulder into the house. Like he was searching for something. That's when I knew. He wasn't guessing anymore. He knew something had been delivered. And he wanted it bad. Real bad. Mom, he said quietly, you're messing with things you don't understand. My voice came out just as quiet. Then maybe it's time somebody explained it to me. For a second neither of us moved. Then one of the suited men finally spoke. First time. Low voice. Cold. Ma'am, we're not here to argue. That was the moment I noticed something else. Parked at the end of my driveway. Another car had pulled up. And someone inside it was watching the whole conversation. Watching Derek. Watching the men. Watching me. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. There were more players in this game than I thought. Because the person sitting in that car at the end of Loretta's driveway was someone who knew exactly what was hidden under her land. And within the next hour, Loretta would discover the trapdoor Calvin died trying to protect. Let me tell you something about living in the country for most of your life. You learn how to read people the same way you read weather. You see the storm coming before the clouds even show up. And standing there in my doorway, staring at my son and the two suits behind him, I could feel a storm rolling in fast. Derek tried to keep his voice calm. Mom, let's not make this complicated. I leaned against the doorframe like I had all the time in the world. Well, son, you the one who showed up with backup. The two men behind him didn't say much, but they watched everything. One of them had his hands folded in front of him like security at a nightclub. The other kept scanning the property like he was memorizing it. Didn't like that one bit. Derek rubbed his temples. Look, if somebody gave you something yesterday, it could cause problems. What kind of problems? I asked. His jaw tightened. The kind that gets people hurt. That sentence sat heavy between us. Before I could respond, the sound of a car engine broke the silence. We all turned. The sedan parked down at the end of the driveway slowly backed up, then drove away. Derek noticed it too. For the first time, I saw a flash of worry in his eyes. Interesting. Very interesting. The man beside him leaned close and whispered something I couldn't hear. Derek nodded, then looked back at me. Mom, we'll talk later. Just like that. He turned around and walked back to the SUV. The two men followed. No more questions. No more pressure. And that bothered me more than if they had stayed. Because people only leave that quickly when they already have another plan. The SUV disappeared down the dirt road, leaving dust floating through the morning air. I closed the door slowly. Locked it. then leaned against it while my heart pounded. Calvin's words echoed in my mind again. They're already watching the house. Well, if they were watching, that meant they were waiting. Waiting for me to make a move. So I did something they probably didn't expect. I grabbed the brass key off the kitchen table and headed straight for the barn. The morning air was cool as I walked across the yard. The red clay crunched under my shoes. That old barn stood just where it always had, paint peeling, roof sagging a little more every year. Beside it sat the tool shed Calvin mentioned. I hadn't opened that thing in at least 10 years. The wooden door looked like it had grown into the frame. Dust covered the rusty padlock. My hands trembled as I slid the brass key into the lock. For a second it didn't move. Then, click. The lock popped open. A chill ran down my spine. The door creaked loud as I pushed it open. Inside smelled like old wood, motor oil, and years of forgotten tools. Sunlight slipped through the cracks in the walls. Just like Calvin said. A workbench sat along the back wall. I walked toward it slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last. "All right, Calvin," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what secret you've been hiding." The bench was piled with old toolboxes and dusty jars full of nails. I moved them one by one. Hammer. Wrenches. Rusty coffee cans. Then I saw it. A small metal ring set into the wooden floor beneath the bench. My heart started racing. Lord have mercy. I grabbed the ring and pulled. The wooden panel lifted with a groan. And underneath it was a dark opening in the ground. A ladder disappeared into blackness. Cold air drifted up from below. Air that smelled like damp earth and something else. Something metallic. For a long moment, I just stood there staring into that hole. The ground beneath my property. The place Calvin died trying to protect. My husband had built a hidden tunnel under our land. And I had never known. But before I could climb down, a sound came from behind me. Gravel crunching. Footsteps. More than one person. Slow. Careful. And coming straight toward the shed. My heart slammed against my ribs. Because Derek and those men weren't supposed to be back yet. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. They hadn't left the property. They had just gone around the back. And now, they knew exactly where I was. Because when the shed door suddenly swings open, Loretta won't just discover who followed her. She'll discover why Derek is so desperate to keep her out of that tunnel. And what she sees underground will prove Calvin was telling the truth all along. The footsteps outside the shed stopped. Right outside the door. For a second, the whole world went quiet. No birds. No wind. Just my heartbeat thumping in my ears. I was standing there with the trapdoor open at my feet, staring down into that dark hole in the ground, when the shed door creaked slowly open behind me. I didn't even have to turn around. I already knew who it was. Mom. Derek's voice filled the small shed. Low. Tired. And just a little angry. I closed my eyes for half a second before turning around. He stood in the doorway with the two suited men behind him again. Sunlight poured around their silhouettes, turning them into dark shapes against the bright yard outside. Derek looked from me to the open trapdoor. His face went pale. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. So that was it. No pretending anymore. No point lying now, huh? I said quietly. One of the men stepped forward, glancing down into the opening. "Looks like she found it," he said. Derek rubbed his face like someone whose worst fear had just come true. "Mom, you shouldn't be here." I folded my arms. "Well, funny thing about that, son. It's my land." He didn't argue with that. Instead, he took a slow step toward me. You don't understand what this place is. Then explain it. His eyes flicked toward the tunnel again. Then back to me. Not here. The second man spoke up. Too late for that. He walked past Derek and crouched near the opening, shining a flashlight down into the darkness. The beam vanished deep into the tunnel. Yup, he said. Still there. My stomach twisted. Still where? I demanded. Derek sighed. The kind of sigh people make when the truth is about to spill whether they want it to or not. There's a network of tunnels under this property, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You mean like the one I'm looking at? He shook his head. Bigger than that. Way bigger. The other man stood up. These tunnels been here since the 1960s, he added casually. Old smuggling routes back when people ran contraband through rural counties. My mouth fell open slightly. You're telling me my land is sitting on top of some bootleg highway? Pretty much, the man said. Derek shot him an annoyed look. That's not helping. I looked back at my son. And you knew about this? He didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. How long? I asked quietly. About 8 years. 8 years. My hand started shaking. You've been using my land for 8 years? Derek stepped forward quickly. It's not like that. Oh, it ain't? I snapped. His voice hardened. Mom, this operation moves millions of dollars worth of product. That word hit my ears wrong. Product. What kind of product? I asked. Neither of the men answered. That silence said everything. My chest tightened. Lord. Derek. He looked away. The man with the flashlight spoke calmly. Drugs mostly. Sometimes weapons. Depends on the shipment. My stomach dropped. You brought that mess onto my land? Derek raised his hands. We kept it contained. Nobody got hurt. Except your father. I shouted. The shed went silent. The words hung there heavy in the air. Derek's face darkened. That wasn't supposed to happen. My heart skipped. What does that mean? His eyes met mine slowly. Dad figured it out. The blood rushed in my ears. You killed him. No. Derek snapped immediately. The word came out sharp. But not convincing. He threatened to expose everything, Derek said quietly. Said he was going to the police. My throat tightened. And then he died. Derek looked like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't. The silence said the rest. I looked down at the dark tunnel beneath my feet. This was the truth Calvin died protecting. Proof buried under my own backyard. And my son, my baby boy, had built a criminal operation under the home his father loved. But then the man with the flashlight said something that froze my blood. There's still the problem. I looked up. What problem? He nodded toward the tunnel. The evidence. Derek's eyes slowly moved back to me. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. They hadn't come here just to talk. They came to make sure nothing inside that tunnel ever saw daylight. And right now, I was the only witness standing in their way. Because in the next few minutes inside that shed, Loretta will realize something horrifying. Derek and those men never planned on letting her walk out alive once she discovered the truth. When you get to my age, you learn something important about fear. It doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it shows up quiet, like a cold hand wrapping around your spine. That's exactly how it felt standing in that shed with my son and those two men. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was moving fast. But every instinct in my body was screaming one thing. You're in danger. Derek stood a few feet away from me, his eyes shifting between my face and the open trapdoor in the floor. The tunnel below us felt like a mouth waiting to swallow everything. One of the men, the taller one with the flashlight, folded his arms. "Well," he said casually, "this is a problem." I stared straight at him. "What problem?" His eyes slid toward me like he was looking at something already decided. "You weren't supposed to know about any of this." My stomach twisted. Derek ran a hand through his hair. "Look. Mom, it doesn't have to go bad." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh really? That's funny, 'cause it already sounds pretty bad." The second man stepped closer to Derek. "Boss won't like this," he muttered. "Boss?" So there was someone even higher up the ladder. "Just great." Derek lowered his voice. "Give me a minute." The man backed off a step but stayed close enough to hear. My son looked at me like he was searching for something in my face. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe understanding. Maybe just a way out. "Mom," he said quietly, "you gotta trust me." I blinked at him. "Trust you?" My voice cracked a little. "You built a drug tunnel under my land, got mixed up with criminals, and somehow your daddy ended up dead." His jaw tightened. "I didn't kill him." "You sure about that?" The words came out before I could stop them. Derek flinched. For a second, the little boy I raised flickered across his face. Then it was gone. "Things got out of hand," he said. That sentence made my chest burn. "Out of hand?" I repeated slowly. "Your father is buried in the ground, Derek." His voice dropped. "He was going to ruin everything." "Everything?" I said. "Or your money?" The taller man cleared his throat impatiently. "We don't got time for family therapy." Derek shot him an irritated look but didn't argue. Instead he stepped closer to me. "You don't understand the kind of money moving through those tunnels," he said. "I don't want to. You could live like a queen if you'd just sell the property." I stared at him. "You still talking about selling after all this?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Why?" His eyes flicked toward the tunnel again. "Because once the land changes owners, everything underground becomes somebody else's problem." The truth clicked into place like a puzzle piece. Developers. Construction. Bulldozers. Concrete. All the evidence buried forever. "You're trying to erase it," I whispered. Derek didn't answer. That silence said it all. The second man shifted his weight again. "So what's the move?" Derek looked back at me. His eyes were colder now. "Mom. I need you to hand over anything that woman gave you yesterday." My heart skipped. The envelope. The key. The letter I hadn't even read yet. I shrugged slowly. "What makes you think she gave me anything?" Derek's patience snapped. "Because somebody tipped her off about the tunnels." His voice echoed through the shed. The two men stiffened. That's when something else clicked in my head. If Derek thought that woman knew about the tunnels, then whoever sent her was already inside this mess. I took a step backward toward the trapdoor. Derek noticed instantly. "Don't." But I had already made up my mind. Because Calvin didn't hide that tunnel for no reason. Whatever proof was down there, it was the only thing standing between truth and whatever story Derek planned to tell when I disappeared. My foot touched the ladder. The man with the flashlight cursed. "She's going down." Derek lunged forward. "Mom, stop." Too late. I grabbed the ladder and started climbing down into the darkness. Cold air rushed up around me. The tunnel swallowed the light from the shed above. Behind me I heard Derek shout. "Don't let her get to the storage room." Storage room. My heart slammed against my ribs. Because if there was a room down here, Then Calvin hadn't just been hiding tunnels. He'd been hiding evidence. And now 3 dangerous men were climbing down right behind me. Because deep inside the underground tunnel, Loretta is about to find the box Calvin died protecting. But when she opens it, she'll discover proof that far more people were involved in the operation than she ever imagined. The deeper I climbed down that ladder, the colder the air got. Not just cool. Cold like the kind of damp chill that lives underground where sunlight never touches. My hands trembled as I reached the dirt floor at the bottom. The ladder rattled above me. Derek and those men were already climbing down. Fast. Too fast. I grabbed the flashlight hanging from a hook near the wall, something Calvin must have left there, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness. And that's when I finally saw the tunnel. It stretched out in both directions like a long underground hallway carved through the earth. The walls were reinforced with old wooden beams and metal supports. Someone had spent serious time building this place. Lord. Calvin, I whispered. How long had he known about this? How long had he been fighting this battle without telling me? Behind me the ladder creaked again. They were almost down. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. My footsteps echoed through the tunnel as I followed the narrow passage deeper underground. The flashlight beam bounced off pipes, cables, and old crates stacked against the walls. This wasn't just a tunnel. It was a full operation. And Derek had been running it right under my feet for years. Suddenly I heard his voice behind me. Mom. Stop. The tunnel carried the sound far too well. You don't know where you're going. He was right about that. But I knew something else. If Calvin told me to come down here, then somewhere in this place was the truth. And the truth was the only thing keeping me alive. I kept moving. Left turn. Then another. The tunnels twisted like a maze. Footsteps thundered behind me now. The 2 men were moving fast. One of them shouted. She's heading toward the storage section. Storage. My heart jumped. That had to be what Derek yelled about in the shed. A few seconds later the tunnel opened into a small underground room. Concrete floor. Metal shelves. Plastic containers stacked against the wall. And sitting on an old wooden table in the center, a steel lockbox. My breath caught. This had to be it. Calvin's secret. I rushed to the table and flipped open the lid. Inside were several things sealed carefully in plastic. Flash drives. A thick notebook. A stack of photographs. My hands shook as I grabbed the pictures first. The flashlight beam lit them up. Men shaking hands in parking lots. Black SUVs unloading crates near the barn at night. License plates. Dates written in the margins. And in several photos, Derek. Standing with people who looked far more dangerous than the 2 men chasing me. My stomach twisted. Lord help us. I grabbed the notebook next. Calvin's handwriting filled every page. Times. Shipment records. License plate numbers. Even names. Real names. Police officers. Business owners. Local officials. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just Derek's operation. This thing reached way further than I imagined. Way further. Footsteps thundered closer down the tunnel. They were seconds away now. I grabbed the flash drives and shoved them into my coat pocket. Then folded the notebook under my arm. Just as I slammed the lockbox shut, Derek burst into the room. His chest heaved as he saw the open box. His eyes widened. You found it. The 2 men rushed in behind him. One looked at the empty slots inside the box. Where are the drives? He barked. Derek's eyes locked on me. You took them. I didn't answer. The taller man stepped forward slowly. You just made a very big mistake, ma'am. My back pressed against the wall. 3 men. One narrow exit behind them. No way out. Derek held out his hand. Give me the drives, Mom. His voice sounded almost tired now. Like this whole situation had finally worn him down. We can still fix this. Fix it? I said quietly. You buried your father to protect this mess. His face hardened. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen? I demanded. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Derek finally said something that made the room feel even colder than the tunnel. Dad wasn't supposed to die that night. My heart skipped. What? The taller man cursed under his breath. Don't start talking now. But Derek kept going. He confronted the wrong people. A sick feeling crawled through my chest. What people? Derek looked straight at me. The ones who actually run this operation. My stomach dropped. You mean, you're not the one in charge? He shook his head slowly. No. The 2 men exchanged uneasy glances. Because saying that out loud had just changed everything. And suddenly the man with the flashlight said something that made my blood run cold. If she's got those drives, the boss will want her alive. Alive. Not safe. Not protected. Just alive. For now. And Derek realized the same thing at the exact same moment. His eyes shifted back to me. Fear creeping into them for the first time. Because if the people above him found out those drives were missing, then none of us were safe anymore. Because the moment Loretta escapes the tunnel with Calvin's evidence, a new player will enter the story. The real leader of the operation. And Derek will finally realize something terrifying. His mother might be the only person left who can save them both. Something changed in Derek's face after the man said those words. The boss will want her alive. For the first time since this nightmare started, my son looked scared. Not angry. Not desperate. Scared. And that told me something important. Whatever operation he had gotten himself tangled in, it went way beyond him. Way beyond these 2 men. I tightened my grip on the notebook under my arm. Looks like your secret ain't just yours anymore, I said quietly. The taller man stepped forward slowly. Ma'am, you really don't understand what you're holding. I understand enough, I replied. His eyes flicked toward Derek. You should have handled this earlier. Derek snapped back, I told you I would. Well, now she's got the drives. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. The shorter man rubbed his forehead. We need to call it in. Derek's head snapped toward him. No. You don't have a choice. My pulse quickened. Call who? The man pulled out a phone. And that's when Derek did something I didn't expect. He grabbed the man's wrist. Not yet, Derek said sharply. The room went still. Even I froze. The man glared at him. You think the boss won't find out? Derek's voice dropped low. If he finds out right now, we're all dead. That sentence hit like a thunderclap. Dead. All of us. Even them. The 2 men exchanged uneasy looks. Because apparently they knew exactly what Derek meant. My heart pounded harder. Just how dangerous were these people? Derek turned back to me slowly. Mom, listen. That word, Mom, sounded different now. Not manipulative. Not demanding. Almost pleading. You gotta give me those drives. Why? I asked. So I can make this right. I stared at him. You couldn't make it right when Daddy was alive. His shoulders slumped. That wasn't supposed to happen. You keep saying that. The taller man interrupted impatiently. We are wasting time. He nodded toward the notebook under my arm. That evidence gets out, the whole network burns. I looked down at the pages filled with Calvin's handwriting. Names. License plates. Dates. Proof. Good, I said quietly. The word hung in the air. The man's expression hardened. You really think exposing this helps you? I met his stare. My husband died trying to stop it. The shorter man muttered under his breath. This woman's gonna get us all killed. Derek stepped closer to me. His voice dropped so low the others could barely hear it. Mom, if those drives reach the wrong people, you won't live long enough to see a courtroom. My chest tightened. And whose fault is that? He didn't answer. For a moment we just stood there in the dim light of the tunnel room. 3 criminals. 1 old woman. And a secret big enough to bring down half the county. Then suddenly, a phone buzzed. The sound made everyone jump. The taller man looked down at his pocket. His face went pale. Speak of the devil. Derek's eyes widened. Who is it? The man held up the phone screen. One word glowed there. Boss. The room went silent. Dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The phone kept vibrating. Buzz. 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 Finally the man answered. He put the call on speaker. A voice came through. Slow. Calm. Cold. Tell me something, the voice said. No greeting. No introduction. Just business. The man cleared his throat. Sir, we had a situation. I know. My blood ran cold. He already knew. The voice continued. A woman opened a tunnel on Jackson property this morning. My heart nearly stopped. That meant one thing. Someone had been watching the house the whole time. Watching all of us. Derek swallowed hard. The voice spoke again. And she now has evidence that belongs to me. My fingers tightened around the notebook. The voice paused. Then asked one quiet question. Is Loretta Jackson still alive? Nobody in that tunnel room answered. Not one of us. Because we all understood something terrifying at the exact same moment. The man on the other end of that phone already knew my name. And that meant this whole situation was bigger than any of us imagined. Because the man on that phone call is about to give an order that will force Derek to make an impossible choice. Protect the criminal empire. Or save his own mother. Nobody spoke. Not me. Not Derek. Not the 2 men standing beside him. The only sound in that underground room was the faint crackle coming from the phone speaker. The man on the line had asked one simple question. Is Loretta Jackson still alive? And somehow that question felt heavier than anything else that had happened so far. The taller man cleared his throat. Yes, sir. The word sir sounded forced. Careful. Like the wrong tone might cost him his life. There was a long pause on the line. Long enough for my heart to start racing again. Then the voice came back. Good. Just that one word. But the way he said it made the air feel colder. Put Derek on. The man slowly handed the phone over. Derek hesitated before taking it. His fingers tightened around the device. Yeah, he said quietly. The voice on the other end didn't raise its volume. Didn't need to. Son, you've created a mess. Derek swallowed. I can fix it. Can you? Another pause. The kind that makes people sweat. Then the voice continued. You were given a simple job. Maintain the tunnel. Move the shipments. Keep the land secure. Derek's shoulders stiffened. I did. No, the man replied calmly. You didn't. The words echoed through the room like a verdict. You allowed your father to investigate. Derek closed his eyes briefly. That wasn't supposed to happen. You allowed him to gather evidence. Derek said nothing. And now, the voice continued, your mother has the proof he died trying to protect. Every word hit like a hammer. I glanced down at Calvin's notebook in my hands. The pages suddenly felt heavier. The man spoke again. So here is the question, Derek. My son stood frozen. The voice on the phone went quiet for a moment before delivering the sentence that made my stomach drop. Are you loyal to the operation, or to your family? Derek's head slowly lifted. I could see the conflict written all over his face. The two men in the room shifted nervously. Because they knew exactly what that question meant. The boss continued. You know the rules. Derek whispered, yeah. If evidence leaves that tunnel, everything burns. Silence. If the woman leaves that tunnel. Another pause. So do we. My chest tightened. The meaning was crystal clear. The boss wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening. He was simply stating a fact. Then came the order. Handle it. The line went dead. No goodbye. No further instructions. Just silence. The taller man exhaled slowly. Well, there it is. The shorter one nodded grimly. You heard him. Derek didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the floor. Then slowly, painfully, he lifted his gaze toward me. For a moment I saw the little boy he used to be. The kid who used to chase frogs in the creek behind the barn. The kid who used to fall asleep during Sunday sermons with his head on my shoulder. That boy was still there. Buried under years of bad choices. But still there. Mom, he said quietly. My heart ached hearing that word. But I didn't move. Because I knew what was happening. He took a slow step toward me. The two men watched carefully. Waiting. Watching. Judging. Derek stopped a few feet away. His voice was barely above a whisper. You shouldn't have come down here. I shouldn't have had to, I replied. His jaw tightened. You should have just sold the land. So you could bury the truth? He didn't answer. The taller man spoke again. Clock's ticking. Derek's fists clenched. His eyes moved from me. To the notebook in my hands. To the tunnel exit behind him. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He turned toward the two men. And said quietly. She's leaving. The room froze. The shorter man blinked. What? Derek's voice came out stronger this time. She's leaving this tunnel. The taller man's expression darkened. You just heard the boss. I did. And you're disobeying him? Derek's eyes hardened. Yes. That single word changed everything. Because the moment it left his mouth, we all realized something. Derek hadn't just chosen his mother. He had just declared war on the people running the entire operation. And somewhere out there, the boss was already preparing for what happened next. Because once Derek betrays the operation, the most dangerous people in the network will come looking for all of them. And the final battle for the truth buried under Loretta's land is about to begin. You don't really know a person. Not fully. Until they're forced to choose between what they've built and what they love. Standing there in that underground room, my son had just made his choice. And I could see it all over his face. Fear. Regret. And something I hadn't seen in a long time. Shame. The taller man stepped forward immediately. You just made a very bad decision, he said coldly. Derek didn't back down. Yeah, he replied. I know. The shorter one reached into his jacket slightly. Boss ain't gonna forgive this. Derek shook his head. I ain't asking him to. My heart was pounding, but I stayed still. Because this moment? This was bigger than fear. This was the line in the sand. The taller man took another step. So what now? He asked. Derek didn't hesitate. Now you leave. That almost made me laugh. Almost. The two men looked at each other. Then back at Derek. You think it's that simple? One of them said. No, Derek admitted. But it's happening anyway. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Everything after that moved fast. Too fast. The shorter man lunged first. Derek reacted instantly. They crashed into each other, slamming into the metal shelves. The taller man reached for something under his jacket. And I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find. A heavy wrench from the table. And swung. Hard. It connected with his arm just as he pulled something out. He yelled, dropping it to the floor. A gun. My heart nearly stopped. Run. Derek shouted. That's all I needed. I turned and bolted out of the storage room, clutching Calvin's notebook and the flash drives tight against my chest. The tunnel stretched ahead of me like a lifeline. Behind me I heard shouting. Grunts. Something crashing. But I didn't look back. I just ran. Faster than I had any business running at my age. Because survival doesn't care how old you are. The ladder came into view. I grabbed it and climbed like my life depended on it. Because it did. My hand shook as I pulled myself up into the shed. Sunlight hit my face like a blessing. I stumbled out into the yard. The world above felt too big. Too bright. Too real. I didn't stop moving. I ran toward the house. Toward safety. Toward something. I didn't even know what anymore. A few seconds later. Derek burst out of the shed behind me. Breathing hard. Alive. Thank God. Go, he shouted. Get in the house. I didn't argue. We ran inside and slammed the door. Locked it. For a moment, we just stood there. Both of us breathing hard. Both of us shaking. The silence between us felt different now. Not heavy. Not angry. Just honest. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. You finally did the right thing, I said quietly. He nodded once. Should have done it a long time ago. Sirens cut through the distance. Faint at first. Then louder. Getting closer. Derek's head snapped toward the window. That them? He asked. I shook my head slowly. No. Because I hadn't called the police. But somebody had. And deep down, I had a feeling I knew who. We stepped outside just as multiple vehicles came racing down the dirt road. Not local police. Not county. Black SUVs. Federal markings. Doors flew open. Agents poured out, weapons drawn. Hands where we can see them. The chaos hit all at once. Voices shouting. Men being dragged out of the shed in handcuffs. Those same two men who thought they controlled everything. Now on their knees in the dirt. Derek slowly raised his hands. I held on to the notebook. Tight. Because this was what Calvin died for. The truth. An agent approached me carefully. You Mrs. Jackson? I nodded. My voice came out steady. Yes. He glanced at the notebook. Is that what we've been looking for? I looked down at Calvin's handwriting. Then back at him. Yes, I said. It is. Weeks passed. Then months. The land changed. Not physically. But the feeling of it. The weight that used to sit on my chest every time I looked out across those fields was gone. The tunnels were sealed. Documented. Exposed. Names came out. Big names. People nobody expected. That notebook? It brought everything into the light. Just like Calvin wanted. I visited Derek once. He wasn't the same. But for the first time in years, he was honest. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed him. Didn't forgive him that day. But I believed him. And sometimes, that's where healing starts. I still live on that land. Same house. Same trees. Same quiet mornings. But now when the wind moves through those pecan branches, it doesn't feel like something's watching me anymore. It feels like something's finally at rest. Because the truth about family is this. The deepest betrayal don't come from strangers. It comes from the people closest to you. But strength? Real strength? That shows up when you stand your ground. Even when it means standing alone. And if there's one thing I know for sure now, it's this. No matter how deep the truth is buried, it always finds its way back to the surface.